The sky darkens. Church bells echo like a desperate call, as terrified eyes turn to the horizon. From the raging sea, sinister shadows emerge, slender ships cutting through the waves with the precision of a blade. Men in gleaming helmets, clad in furs and rustic armor, disembark with axes in hand. They did not come to negotiate. They brought no diplomats, only fire and steel. This is the prelude to an era of terror and conquest. The year is 793. The target, a peaceful monastery on the island of Lindisfarne. Within hours, the monks who lived there are massacred, their sacred relics desecrated, and the gold plundered. The shock spreads throughout England, but this is only the beginning. What no one knew was that this brutal attack would mark the start of one of the bloodiest eras in European history. The time of the Vikings had begun, and England would never be the same. The kingdoms of England were still trying to grasp the horror of the attack when they realized that the worst was yet to come. The monastery of Lindisfarne was not an isolated target. It was a warning. In the following years, Viking raiders continued to descend upon the coast, appearing out of nowhere, destroying everything in their path. But the real threat was not just in the fury of their blades. It was in the weakness of those who tried to resist. England at that time was a mosaic of small kingdoms, divided among themselves, known as the Heptarchy. Without a unified force and without a naval fleet to patrol its seas, its defenses were nearly non-existent. While kings and warlords fought among themselves for control of the land, the Vikings took it with ease. They were not just bands of plunderers, they were strategists, exploiting every weakness, every rivalry, every hesitation. In a few decades, the sporadic raids turned into something far more dangerous, a full-scale invasion. What began as simple looting soon became a war for domination. In the year 865, the roar of the waves brought something far worse than mere raiders: the Great Heathen Army. These were not just warriors seeking gold and glory, but a true army of conquest, with thousands of men ready to claim England as their new land. Leading this horde were names that would become legends: Ivar the Boneless, the cold and ruthless strategist; Ubba, the feared warrior known for his brutality; and Halfdan, the cunning commander who shaped the fate of battle with the tip of his blade. But they were not there just for power. According to Norse sagas, their mission was vengeance. Their father, the legendary Ragnar Lothbrok, had allegedly been killed in a cruel manner by the king of Northumbria, and his sons had sworn retaliation. Whether this story was real or merely a justification for conquest mattered little to the English. The fact remained: this army had not come to plunder, it had come to stay. Viking fury first descended upon Northumbria, a kingdom torn apart by internal disputes. King Aelle II, who had taken the throne by force, believed he could withstand the invasion, but he underestimated his enemies. In 866, the Vikings seized the city of Eoforwic, which was soon renamed Jorvik, the heart of the new Scandinavian domain in England. Without a strong enough army to expel them, Aelle II attempted to reclaim the city the following year, only to fall into an ambush. Ragnar's sons captured the king and, according to legend, subjected him to a terrible fate: the Blood Eagle, a gruesome ritual in which the ribs were split open from the back and the lungs pulled out, in a spectacle of horror and vengeance. Truth or myth, the fact was undeniable. Northumbria was under Viking rule, and Jorvik became the first great Scandinavian stronghold on English soil. But the invaders would not stop there. Many more kingdoms were yet to fall. With Northumbria reduced to ashes and under Viking control, the invaders turned their gaze to their next target: Mercia. In 868, Nottingham fell without much resistance, forcing King Burgred to plead for help from the only kingdom still defying the Vikings: Wessex. It was then that a figure emerged who would forever change England's destiny: Alfred, a young Saxon prince who would soon become one of the greatest kings in history. Wessex gathered its forces and marched to confront the invaders, securing a temporary truce. But the Vikings were not a common enemy. They withdrew when necessary, only to return with even greater strength. Before long, they seized East Anglia, taking with it the life of King Edmund, who was captured and brutally executed, becoming a martyr of Christian resistance. Kingdom after kingdom fell, and the Saxons knew they were running out of time. Only one last bastion remained against the Norse fury, and Wessex would become the stage for the most decisive battle of the invasion. The year was 878, and England's fate hung by a thread. The Great Heathen Army had taken nearly the entire island, and Wessex, the last stronghold of Saxon resistance, stood on the brink of collapse. King Alfred, forced into exile in the marshes of Somerset, watched his kingdom crumble before the Viking onslaught. But he was not defeated, he was waiting for the right moment to strike back. Gathering allies and strengthening his forces, Alfred emerged from the shadows and challenged the invaders at the Battle of Edington. On one side, the Saxons fought for survival. On the other, the Vikings led by Guthrum, convinced of their imminent victory. The clash between the armies was brutal, and the battlefield soon became a sea of blood and steel. But at the end of the day, it was Alfred who remained standing. The Vikings, defeated and starving, were forced to retreat to their stronghold. Surrounded and without escape, they had no choice but to accept the Saxon king's terms. For the first time, the invaders had been stopped, and the tide of war began to turn. Defeated but not destroyed, the Vikings had to face a bitter truth. Wessex would not fall so easily. Surrounded, without supplies, and without the chance of reinforcements, Guthrum was forced to accept Alfred's terms, leading to one of the most surprising decisions of the invasion. As part of the agreement, the Viking leader converted to Christianity, was baptized by Alfred himself, and took on a new Saxon name. But this treaty did not mean the end of Norse presence in England, only a division. The kingdom was split in two: to the south, lands controlled by the Saxons; to the north and east, a new entity under Viking rule, the Danelaw, where they governed under their own laws and customs. This division ensured a fragile peace for a time, but everyone knew it would not last forever. The Vikings still dreamed of conquering the entire island, and the Saxons would never accept an enemy within their borders. The war was not over. It had merely changed shape. Years passed, but peace was never more than a fragile illusion. The Vikings had not abandoned their ambition to dominate all of England, and the Saxons knew conflict was inevitable. In 886, Alfred the Great made his decisive move. He gathered his army, crossed the Thames, and reclaimed London from the Norse, a symbolic victory that marked the beginning of a new era. From that moment, the Saxons would not only resist, they would begin to reclaim what had been lost. But the Vikings were not idle. While some settled in the Danelaw, ruling their lands under Scandinavian laws, others formed new alliances, waiting for the right moment to strike. Thus, in 937, the war reached its peak at the Battle of Brunanburh. A coalition of Vikings, Scots, and Welsh marched against the Anglo-Saxons, determined to crush Wessex's rule once and for all. But under the leadership of King Athelstan, the Saxons not only resisted, they massacred their enemies, sealing England's fate. There were no more Saxons, Mercians, or Northumbrians. Now they were all English. The unification of England was complete, and the Viking era on the island had come to an end. Blood, war, and betrayal forged the destiny of a nation. What began as a brutal invasion transformed into an epic conflict that redefined England's history. The Saxon resistance, led by visionary kings like Alfred and Athelstan, not only contained the Viking threat, but turned the chaos of war into a catalyst for the kingdom's unification. What were once divided realms, each fighting for its own survival, now became one people, with a distinct identity and a common purpose. The Vikings left their mark, influencing culture, politics, and even the language, but their dominion over the island had ended. Yet, England's history was far from over. New invaders would rise, new battles would be fought, and new legends would be born. But one thing was certain: the Viking fire may have been extinguished, but the ashes of their passage would never be forgotten. If you enjoyed this journey through history, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a new video. Your support helps us bring more epic stories to life. And we want to hear from you. Leave a comment below telling us what you found most interesting about the Viking invasion and the battles that shaped England. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.